Give an extended answer to each IELTS speaking question. Sounds great. But what if you struggle to think of a way to extend your answers even in your native language? These 4 simple techniques can help you expand your ideas and get a better score in your fluency and coherence. They can even help you show off your vocabulary and grammar to your advantage. Interested? It's Asia. Let's get started. In simple terms, the examiner is listening out for the ways you put your thoughts together, especially how you extend or expand on your ideas. In the examiner's speaking test band descriptors, it says that to deserve a band 7 in fluency and coherence, the candidate should be able to speak at length without noticeable effort or loss of coherence. Whereas moving up to a band 8 means that he or she can develop topics coherently and appropriately. The examiner will award the magic band 9 to someone who develops topics fully and appropriately. Fluency. That wonderful feeling of your words flowing like a water, or at least not drying up completely. Yes, that's key. Today, we're going to talk about the following 4 ways to expand your answers: condition and restriction, attitude and opinion, reason and result, and contrast and doubt. Let's take them one by one with examples using typical IELTS topic questions from all 3 parts of the speaking test. Number 1. Condition and restriction. The 2 words to use are if and unless. Right, conditional sentences. Old grammar class favorite. Let's take an example. You are talking about schools in part 1 and the last question you're asked is, would you like to become a teacher? We know that part 1 questions require fairly short answers, a couple of sentences at most. But here is your chance to show how well you can handle the more complex English structures. I don't think so. If I had more patience, then perhaps I would. But there is also the salary issue. If they pay teachers more, who knows? This is an example of using if to present an unreal situation. We're saying this is not true, but in other circumstances, it's a different story. So we need to use a verb in the past tense after if and a verb in the conditional form, usually with would, in the other part of the sentence, the main clause. If we take the written form of the language as our model, the sentences will look like this. If I had more patience, I would like to become a teacher. If they paid more, I would consider becoming a teacher. In spoken English, we didn't finish either sentence. Perhaps I would. Who knows? These are typical examples of spoken English. We leave a lot unsaid. It avoids the unnecessary repetition of elements that are already there. In speaking, we don't have to complete it. Spoken English is never exactly the same as written English. And so if you want that high band score in the speaking test, it's important that your grammar is as correct as possible, but also that it sounds natural as well. Let's look at the second part 1 example, a series of questions about watches. The topic was reported in one of the recent exams, and actually we have a free PDF with recent writing and speaking topics on our Telegram channel. I'll link it below. So the topic of watches may start with, do you usually wear a watch? And end with, why do some people like to buy expensive watches? Here is an answer. If you ask me, owning an expensive watch is a kind of status symbol. It makes you look and maybe feel important. Now, an expression like, if you ask me, in this context, is not really conditional. We often use it in conversation to exchange opinions. Using it in IELTS speaking would certainly give you credit with your examiner, though. Moving on to part 2 of the test, where there will be many opportunities to use conditional sentence with if. Let's take up again the general topic of school or education in a more general sense. What if the part 2 topic reads something like this? Describe a subject you didn't like at school, but that interests you now. If I had my time all over again, I would pay more attention to the literature classes. The classic second conditional with the verb in the if clause in the past tense and the verb with would in the main clause. Then the candidate goes on to say, I'm sure that if I'd never met my partner, I wouldn't have become so interested in learning more about great works of literature. Yes, the third conditional, where we talk about past we cannot change. Again, getting the grammar correct is very important. In the third conditional, in the if clause, we put had and past participle. If I had met. In the main clause, we put would have plus past participle. I would have become or I wouldn't have become. When we speak, we tend to shorten the auxiliary verbs. I'd never met. I would have become. I'd have become. When I was learning English, I hated the third conditional. So if you don't feel confident using it, know that you don't really have to. What you inevitably have to face in your exam is part 3, where the examiner is really trying to stretch you to see how good your English really is. The questions become more hypothetical and require more complex answers. All the more reason to know your conditionals. Let's change our topic. In part 3, imagine that you're talking about health. Your part 2 topic was something like, describe something you do that keeps you fit and healthy. The examiner asks you, to what extent are governments responsible for the health of their citizens? Well, how about this for an answer? I strongly believe that unless governments take measures to limit the sugar content in things like soft drinks, the health of a lot of people will be at risk. And then the reasons behind this way of thinking would follow. Note that although this answer is close to how we write, it's still recognizable as the kind of English we speak, like soft drinks, a lot of people. These phrases are informal. Unless, of course, simply means if not. Let's move on to our second category. It's time to turn to attitude and opinion and the modal verbs would and should. Modal verbs are often used when we express our opinions, for example, to show how true we think something is. Going back to part 1 and that question about becoming a teacher, let's add a little to our answer. If they pay teachers well, then who knows? I mean, if teachers received the benefits they deserved, the world would be a fairer place. Here it's clear that the conditional sentence is an expression of how the speaker feels, her attitude. The world would be a fairer place under that condition. In fact, we can say, teachers should earn a good salary. Should can mean what is ideal, what's desired. Teachers should earn well. We should have more hospitals, and so on. But it can also indicate probability. Compare these two sentences. For teenagers, classes should start late, around 11 a.m. at the earliest, because that fits in with their sleep patterns. If we do that, then academic performance should generally improve. The first should does show what's ideal, or just what's a good idea. But the second should is an expression of probability. I'm saying it's probable or likely that performance will improve. Now, part 2 of the test, becoming interested in a subject you didn't like at school. The candidate mentioned before not paying attention to literature. What if we put that in this context? My literature teacher said I had potential. I really should have listened to her. If I had done, then I wouldn't be practically starting from scratch with the subject now. Yes, you should have. That feeling of regret at not having done something in the past is so common, but we need to look at the grammar of it. Should have plus past participle of the main verb. Should have listened. Again, we pronounce have as of, should have. We can also regret doing something. I shouldn't have given up my studies when I did. And in part 3, these uses of should are particularly useful. On our sugar topic, what they should have done a long time ago was place a tax on sugary drinks, because that would have put people off buying them and so reduced the risk of obesity. The more complex the ideas, the more complex the language we need to express our ideas. And inevitably, we add reasons, because, and results. So, explaining yourself and identifying causes is another important area in the speaking test. Starting with part 1. Do you usually wear a watch? Not at all these days. I have worn one, but now, like everybody else, I have a smartphone, and so I use that. So expresses the result or consequence. The answer could be extended. Actually, I was thinking about getting a smartwatch because I'm very health conscious these days. So if I had one, I'd be able to check my heart rate and other health-related metrics. We've added because to show the reason why, and so to explain the possible results. What about part 2 and literature? Because I've spent the last few years studying and now working as an engineer surrounded with hard facts and numbers, for me to sit down reading a novel feels so good. Now let's go to our part 3, sugar tax. When the sugar tax is imposed, these soft drinks will become more expensive, so their consumption should go down. I've chosen these 2 words, so and because. They're nice and simple to remember and are very common in spoken English. Using them correctly will give you the space to develop your ideas around them and help push your score up. Now let's turn to another important aspect of IELTS tests. Those moments when you're asked to compare or contrast 2 things. Let's talk about though and on the other hand. There are many ways we can compare and contrast in English apart from the very common and obvious but. I've chosen though, along with the phrase on the other hand, as being more representative of how we speak. Here is an example from part 2. Though I never took much interest in literature when I was at school, these days I'm really getting into it. Of course, my choice of though could be replaced by although because here they're perfectly interchangeable. We can also put it in the middle of the sentence. Part 1 question. Did you enjoy science classes at school? Generally, I did, though I found physics particularly difficult to understand. Though can be a connector like although. It can also mean however or nevertheless, but it sounds more natural in conversation. Look at this example. What the government proposed, though, will never work because manufacturers will find ways to get around the new law. In an essay, I would use however because it's more formal, though is more informal and is better for your speaking test. we tend to use though at the end. Have a look at this example. Should somebody study maths until they finish high school? Well, it seems to be a good idea in theory, but I'm not so sure though. I mean, if you're really bad at it, but say good in languages or whatever, what would be the point? Contrasting two opposing views is a skill that will be rewarded in IELTS speaking. Another way to do it is using on the other hand. It's similar to however or nevertheless, but can be used even in part 1. Why do some people like to buy expensive watches? I really don't know. I mean, why waste money on a luxury item you don't really need? On the other hand, I guess we're all free to spend our cash on what we feel like. Comparing or contrasting is a great way to extend your answers, which can be used in any part of your speaking exam, even in part 2. Though this part is quite unique in the sense that you have to speak completely on your own and ideally for 2 minutes. What if, on top of this, you get a topic you know nothing about? That's what I'm talking about in this video here, how to talk for 2 minutes when you don't know what to say. And don't forget to download our free PDF guide with recent IELTS writing and speaking topics in the description. Thank you so much for watching me today. Good luck with your preparation and your exam. Bye!